So I just got the A7 IV back from being repaired. It's been at the shop for the last 2 or 3 weeks because of a little mishap that happened while I was in Europe. I walked away from the camera for a second when it was on the tripod, and a massive gust of wind came out of nowhere, blew the tripod over, and it landed exactly on the LCD screen because it was flipped out at the time, shattered, detached from the body, so I had to send it off. But now it's back, and I'm actually ready to share more of a long-term review of the A7 IV, comparing it to the Canon R6, which is the camera that I've been using long term for probably the last 1.5 to 2 years now. So if you saw the last video that I made about the A7 IV, you'll know that I was really happy with the Canon system overall, using it for the last, I don't know, like I've owned a Canon camera since like 2013. But there was one thing that was really frustrating me with the switch over to the RF system, and that is the lens selection. Switching over to the Sony system for the last 6 months has allowed me to carry around a portable kit of really fast and sharp lenses that don't cost the same as a small car. And if you want to see which lenses are actually in my bag at the moment for the Sony system, I've done a video about that, which I'll link in the top right hand corner. So it's taken me a little bit of time to get used to the camera, how to handle it, the menu system, everything like that. But now I can confidently say that after 6 months, most things on this camera are second nature to me. However, one of my biggest worries with using the A7 IV was the video codec and also the color profiles in video, because in the past, those are the things that I've had the biggest issues with. While the A7 IV, in my opinion, still doesn't look as good as the Canon cameras like the R5 and the R6 in terms of color. This is also just subjective, by the way. I know some people like the look of different cameras, and that's totally fine. I've actually really come to like the colors out of the A7 IV, and it's kind of forced me into learning more about the color gamut and the color profile conversion that you have to do after you've shot the footage if you are shooting an S-Log. For such a long time, I actually avoided using log profiles, even though pretty much everyone on YouTube was like, oh, you have to use log, you have to use flat, you have to do this and that. And I just never saw the point of doing it, because all of these cameras recorded in 8-bit 420 color, and you would always get this blocking and banding in all of the footage, and it just looked super ugly despite everyone saying how much better it was and the better dynamic range and all this sort of stuff. All those issues were just too much for me. And there were some codecs that did 422, did 10-bit, and they still suffered from that banding. But then Canon implemented their 10-bit 422, I think it's the H.265 codec if I'm not mistaken, and that actually had no artifacting and hardly any banding. And so since then I was like, wow, like we've finally found a camera that does log profiles well, and the footage actually looks really, really great. And this is actually what I thought would be a big issue with the A7 IV. I didn't expect the codec to hold up as well as the R6 and R5, but it actually does. The 422 10-bit looks great. Yes, the colors are different, but when I'm color grading the footage and putting it all into a video, I'm actually really happy with the result I'm getting, and I guess that's the main thing, right? Another huge win for the A7 IV for me has been the gyro stabilization. So this is exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm just walking along with the camera on a Gorilla Pod. The steady shot is turned off, so right now on the screen, it doesn't look very stable, but what you guys should be seeing is the footage after it's been run through Catalyst Browse and stabilized. And after you've done this, the footage looks really, really smooth, and I absolutely love that. So yes, it is an extra step in post-production, and it can get a little bit convoluted, and you do have to keep your shutter speed higher than normal, so around 125 or 1/160th of a second. However, this feature has enabled me to get really silky, smooth, beautiful looking footage in situations where I probably wouldn't have otherwise. Especially when I'm traveling, having to bring a tripod, a Gorilla Pod sometimes when I'm doing some talking head stuff, as well as a gimbal. It really weighs you down, and to be able to pretty much leave the gimbal at home if I want to and just use the gyro stabilization has honestly been amazing. So that's enough of the nerdy video stuff. Now I want to talk about photography. So probably the biggest thing that people talk about or think about when they're comparing, say, an R6 to the Sony A7 IV is the megapixel difference. The A7 IV having 33 megapixels and the Canon R6 having 20 megapixels. For the most part, it's not the biggest problem for me. 20 megapixels is totally fine. However, I have noticed that if I wanted to crop in a little bit more, the images just look a little bit sharper, on the A7 IV. Now, it's not that often that I do heavy cropping. However, in the past, I definitely stayed away from cropping my images because of that resolution loss. But with the A7 IV, I'm definitely less scared to do a heavy crop because the photos actually look great when you crop in. I actually noticed straight away on my first few shoots that the A7 IV just isn't as accurate at autofocus as the R6 is. Sony actually claimed to have fixed this with their 1.01 firmware, and I have installed that on the camera and done a few shoots, and I've noticed that it is slightly better, but it's not all the way fixed. Still did miss a few shots from time to time where my R6 would get like 100% hit rate. So we are talking like 2 to 3 photos out of 100 that were slightly out of focus. It's not like a night and day difference between the R6 and the A7 IV, but still interesting to mention. Like, I find that these days, these cameras are just so good that there's very little difference between them. And also on a shoot, I take way too many photos anyway. So there's usually a very good chance that if I do get a shot out of focus, the one next to it in the catalog will most likely be in focus anyway. So it's really no big deal. The dynamic range on the A7 IV is fantastic. I really have no complaints. I've been able to recover plenty of shadow detail. In terms of like in a real world situation, I haven't noticed a big difference between the R6 and the A7 IV in terms of its dynamic range. I have found a little hack within the camera settings that allows you to get really great exposure every single time on the A7 IV, which I'll probably make a video about really soon. If you guys are interested, let me know down in the comments section below. But I didn't ever feel like I was limited by the A7 IV while I was traveling around in Europe, except for after I broke my screen, because from that point forward, I just had to use the viewfinder, so I couldn't get any low angle shots or anything like that, but obviously that's my fault. And ultimately, I came away with some photos that I was really proud of. Out of the lenses that I used most on my recent trip, it was definitely the Tamron 17-28 and the 70-180. Those two lenses allowed me to capture some beautiful images, and they're compact, lightweight, really easy to carry around. Honestly, I think the R6 is just the best portrait, wedding, lifestyle camera at the moment because of its autofocus hit rate. The A7 IV for me is just a better travel camera because of the lens selection. For the Canon system, you have to adapt the older lenses if you want to go for third-party options. Right now, at the time of recording this video, they don't have the 17-28 or the 70-180 lens. And if you want to stick with native lenses, you're looking at much more expensive options, which are much larger and much heavier. So what would I change about the A7 IV? Well, realistically, my only gripe about the A7 IV is that it doesn't shoot 4K 60p in full frame like the R6 does. I don't use a lot of slow motion in my vlogs and videos, but it would be nice to have the option to record 4K 60. So what's the conclusion? What did I decide to do? Well, for now, I will be keeping my Canon R6. Hopefully sometime in the future, they will expand their lens lineup so that it is a little bit more accessible for most people, and they just expand their options. They have more things to choose from. But for right now, I will probably for the most part be switching over to the A7 IV because I've really enjoyed using it, and why slow down now? I'm really looking forward to testing out even more lenses, bringing this camera on a trip that I'm about to go on in just over a week's time now, and really just continuing to push my creativity with this A7 IV as my main tool. If you guys do like the look of the footage or any of the photos that I was putting up throughout this video, you can download my preset pack and my LUT pack for video down in the description below. These are some looks that I've been working on for like 3 or 4 years now, and I'm very proud of them. Checking those out really helps to support my channel and helps me to make more videos like this. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Remember to make a story worth telling, and I'll see you guys in the next video.